Greetings, Taco Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all yet again another Arrow episode review right here on Otaku Assemble Weekly, and as always, here to bring you the latest in this week's Arrow episode review. And this is my review of Season 4, Episode 22, entitled Lost in the Flood. Now, general thoughts on this week's episode. I actually don't have too many thoughts about this week's episode. I think it was a good episode overall, but I will go ahead and comment on a couple of things I think the episode did pretty well. One thing in particular, I think, though it was done well, didn't provide as much of a payoff as I think it should have. And then I'll discuss another thing that I think was done well, but was overall misplaced in this week's episode. So, this week, picking up where we left off from last week's episode, where Thea is still within the Ark, which they actually did name in this week's episode. I think it was like Tevet Noah was the name of it. So, Thea, at the beginning of this episode, gets apprehended by Malcolm, and she's drugged in order for her to become more compliant. Now, at this time, Oliver and Diggle have decided to go ahead and infiltrate the Ark to rescue her, in which case Thea is actually used as a foil for them. So, throughout the episode, the first main storyline is just Oliver and Diggle trying to rescue Thea from the Ark. The second one deals with Felicity and Noah, as they have sort of bought themselves time in order to handle Rubicon. Meanwhile, Darhk has decided to go ahead and employ the services of Felicity's ex-boyfriend slash criminal mastermind hacker, who pretty much serves as the foil for Felicity and Noah in this week's episode, while we get a little bit of Smoke family drama with Donna and Noah, and then of course Curtis returns this week. So that pretty much is the bulk of our second main storyline. And yeah, we got a couple of flashbacks once again in this episode, and as always, I still don't know what the purpose of these things are. So that pretty much gives as much of a brief synopsis for this episode as you can figure. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I want to jump into the things about this episode I think actually worked really well. First and foremost, I want to go ahead and start things off with this, because I actually don't comment on this enough in this show, but this week's episode gave me enough reason to really bring it to your attention, and that is the technical execution in this episode. This episode is probably one of the best directed episodes this season, and what I mean by that is the cinematography was really good in this episode. Some of the camera shots, especially the scene where Oliver and Diggle, the big chase scene when Oliver and Diggle are running down the street throughout the little neighborhood in the Ark, and they're in the middle of that firefight with the Hive members, like, that was shot really well. And I was actually impressed by how much. Also, the editing in this episode, okay, like, I've seen this done a few times where they'll do it's sort of like a seamless edit, if you will, right? Where it's a single tracking shot, and instead of cutting like you normally would expect, no, they just lead you in, straight in, right? We see this at the very beginning where we start the episode off with the preview, and then when we get to the scene when Oliver and Diggle corner Darhk, and when he has that totem, yeah, we start off with the last scene we saw in last week's episode, and instead of cutting and then opening us up right there, no, it's one continuous shot straight through the action. The second time we see this is when Oliver, Diggle, and I think, yeah, when Oliver and Diggle confront the family, when they're discovered by that family in the house, and then Ruve, Darhk, comes on the television screen. That tracking shot, right? Like, we don't have them in that living room, and then it cuts to the television, and then we get the broadcast, right? No, that sucker cuts on while the scene is going on, and then we just whip focus to the television. Like, those sort of edits that we got in this episode, I think was really well done. I was kind of shocked by it. Now, I will say this though, the one little thing about it, okay, through that four-way fight that we got with Anarchy, Diggle, Oliver and Thea, like, okay, the group choreography, the choreography in the group fights, it's starting to get a bit repetitive. And I know that these are sort of rehearsed like routines, but after so many, I mean, if you really go back and you start looking at this season alone, just look at this season alone, like those group fights really start to feel repetitive when you start paying attention to what's actually going on in them, almost to the point where you can actually predict how the fight is going to end based upon the routine they're doing. So that's the only little hiccup about when you're talking about the technical execution of the episode, that's the only little hiccup I would bring up. Now I'm going to talk about the one thing in this episode I think worked really well, but it didn't serve as big enough of a payoff in my opinion, and that was Anarchy. Because here's the thing, you all will remember in my review last week how I talked about Anarchy's story arc needed to be resolved, right? That the last 2 times he had appeared in this season, his motivation was getting revenge on Damien Darhk. And so the way in which we left Anarchy in last week's episode, I thought that his arc wasn't finished, and I thought that it wasn't fulfilled because he never actually even came within arm's length of what his main objective was. His objective is revenge against Darhk, right? But in his last 2 appearances, he never even comes in contact with Darhk. Now, this time he actually has infiltrated a hive facility, which is the Ark, so chances of that fateful meeting is actually greater than in the past. But I said last week that if he did not get at least one more scene with Darhk before his story arc was concluded, that it wouldn't have been a payoff, right? Now, in this week's episode, he is actually the main foil, we find out by the end of the episode, because he has infiltrated the control room in the Ark, and he kidnaps Ruve and holds her and her daughter at, hostage. Not only that, not only is he holding them hostage, he sends a broadcast to Damien Darhk letting him know that, hey, I have your family, and in 20 minutes, I'm going to kill one of them. Now, if you show up before that time, it'll be you, and I'll let them go. But he also says that if you aren't here by 20 minutes, not only will I kill one of them, but in 21 minutes, I'm going to level the entire Ark. I'm going to blow it sky high. So he actually forces Darhk to act. I like the fact that his objective did not stop with the encounter with Thea and Malcolm in last week's episode. Like, he actually did, he stayed on the lam, he stayed on the loose, he infiltrated that control room, and he actually tried to pull that off. This is where the problem lies, though. There was no payoff. Why? Because Darhk never surfaced. Darhk never showed up. That I think was a mistake. I really think, especially if in fact Anarchy is dead. If he is dead, we are led to believe he is because, of course, the Ark blew up, right? It blew up. And we know that we know that Anarchy killed Ruve and that she was left in the rubble, so we know that she's dead. And of course, anyone else who was left in that facility, they're dead as well. And anyone who didn't evacuate with Malcolm leading them, they died as well. Anarchy did take out the Ark, which does, and he killed Ruve. That strikes a huge blow to Damien Darhk himself. But the fact that Darhk never surfaced, the fact that he never showed up, I think that was a big mistake. I think what could have worked really well, and roll with me with this. Let me know what you all think in the comments below about this idea. So we open the episode immediately following the aftermath of that town that Felicity redirected one of the missiles, and it hit and it killed all those people. And we know that that's how Darhk sort of got his new power up, if you will, because if his magic feeds off of death, then yes, tens of thousands of people, that added to his power. And that was our opening scene when Oliver and Diggle confronted him in that cave with that totem, right? Okay. What do you all think about this? What if we didn't get that scene at the beginning? Oliver and Diggle just went ahead into the Ark to get Thea, and then the episode unfolds like it did, right? But by the end of the episode, instead of having Darhk never show up, Darhk actually does appear, and enraged after Anarchy goes ahead and kills Ruve anyway. Like, let's just say Anarchy just went ahead and killed him just for the sake, just killed her just because he was that ticked off, right? What if Darhk retaliated with the new abilities he had gained from the bombing? And that's how we, the audience, as well as Oliver, Diggle, and Thea and whatnot, discovered like, oh snap, Darhk is more powerful than he's ever been before. Like if they would have done Darhk's power up somewhat like a reveal, because we knew it was going to happen. It's just a more dramatic. It's sort of a more dramatic portrayal of what his new abilities would have been, and also it would have helped close out Anarchy's storyline because it would have given him a definitive death, right? It would have given him a definitive death, and Anarchy could have still had the last laugh because he could have still ended up leveling the arc in the process. And then of course that would have made even more sense that Oliver, Diggle, and Thea would still be alive because they would have had to escape along with Darhk, right? So Darhk wouldn't have just killed them there. Because I had a problem with, Oliver and Diggle, they confront Darhk, but he doesn't kill them. And it's the whole thing is like, oh, I'm not going to kill you right now. I'm going to wait I want you to experience the bombs going off, and then that's how you'll die. See, here's the problem with that, though. If Darhk is supposed to be as competent and as menacing of a villain as he has been this season, he would have never allowed Oliver and Diggle to live right there. Why? Because why would you leave the hero alive if there's the slightest % chance that they could foil your plan? No, dude, you need to put that sucker in the ground so you know that your victory is absolute. Leaving the hero alive, you're just opening the door for your failure later on by the end, at the end of the next episode. Once again, that's too comic bookish villain-like. That's it's like, nah, dude, Nah. That didn't work for me. So anyway, let me know what you all think about that little retelling, if you will, that I proposed. Because I think that would have worked out so much better. And like I said, if nothing else, it would have had a huge dramatic effect. For the climax of the episode that we get to see that, and I think it would have looked pretty cool on camera too. It would have been a cool scene if Darhk just sort of like mangled Anarchy's body with his magic or something like that. Like it could have been something really cool. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to touch up on the Felicity smoke drama, because that's the one thing in this episode. Now, let me go ahead and preface it with this. I think what we were given was fine. I think it was actually fine. And within the context of this episode, that's the only way it could have been done. Having all of that banter, all of that back and forth, all of that bickering and arguing while Felicity and Noah are trying to go ahead and stop Felicity's crazy ex from destroying their systems and taking back Rubicon. Like, the fact that it happened during the action, I think that was the only way it could have happened, because if they would have went ahead and set aside scenes separately to do all of that, it would have been way too jarring, and it would have completely threw off the rest of the episode. It would have killed the pacing of the episode, right? So the fact that we were given that at that time in this episode, I think was a smart move. This is where I think it wasn't such a smart move. I think we should have gotten this much sooner in the season. I think we should have gotten this much, much earlier in the season. And the fact that Curtis went ahead and used Donna and Noah's relationship to draw a parallel to what happened with Felicity and Oliver, if that's how that whole little story arc ended, if that's how that little storyline ended, that really makes me think that this episode should have happened maybe an episode or two after Felicity and Oliver broke up. That's when I think it should have happened. I think it should have happened much, much earlier in the season. Because what I think, and this is what I'm actually shocked by, I would probably say this is the one major negative complaint I have about the episode, is the fact that Felicity's storyline in this episode had nothing to do with her wiping out that town. She killed tens of thousands of people by redirecting that missile. You know that it struck a chord and that it bothered her conscience based upon the end of last week's episode and her first scene in this episode, and how Noah was like, oh, now's not the time to grieve, this, that, and the other. What I think should have been, I think that should have been the main focus of her storyline in this episode, and it should have been the driving force for her making sure that, oh no, we're not going to delay Rubicon, or we're not going to go ahead and redirect any missiles. No, we're going to completely and utterly destroy it. That should have been the main focus for her, and what could have been a good foil for her. Now, yeah, you could have still used her crazy ex-boyfriend hacker. You could have still used him, but I think it would have been much more interesting if Noah was actually playing the Amanda Waller role, if you will. If Noah was the one trying to justify what she did and sort of harboring on the fact that it's like, no, you did the right thing. You shouldn't feel, you might feel bad about it, but you did the right thing. And it was a necessary, even if it was a bad thing, it was a necessary evil, and this, that, and the other. And that could have drew a nice contrast between Felicity and Noah, because as much as they might have in common, they are distinctly two different people, and they chose two different paths in life. And that argument would have been a good way to reinforce that difference that they have. So I think, once again, like I said, what we got with the Smoke family drama, it was good, and I think it was needed, but I also think it should have happened many episodes ago. I think we should have gotten that much sooner than we did. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this week's Arrow episode review. I want to thank you all for joining me again this week. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this week's episode. Let me know your thoughts on any of the topics I brought up in this review, and let me know some of your expectations and speculations on what we will be getting in the finale next week. If you like this video, please feel free to thumb it up, share it with other fans of the show and people you think might get a kick out of this review. And if you have yet to do so, subscribe to the OAW YouTube channel. Annotation is above head. Now, join me tomorrow night for my review of The Legends of Tomorrow Season 1 finale. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.